I remind you that this is being webcast and will be available on the council website. So apologies, please.
Yes, we have apologies from panel members, councillors Marshall and Rouse, and from the CMR, Marcus Hart.
Right. Declarations of interest. None? No? None? Okay. Minutes of public participation. We have none?
That's right.
So, and item 4, minutes of the meeting held on 23rd of July 24. Now, these were held at the Civic Centre in Pershore. So, can we have a recommendation for that? Yeah. Okay, fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we go to item 5, performance 24-25, in-year's budget monitoring. Dave, we meet again, and I think you're going to take us through this one, are you? Yes, so pass over to you.
I will. Thank you, Chair. Yes, after environment yesterday. The performance report, as actually for the other panels, covers up to the end of Q1, and the Q2 information will be presented at the next meeting, the panel next month. In terms of the content, I kept it exactly the same as previously, so the indicators in there are unchanged. But sort of without going into the detail of every single one, there are a few items where it's worth just picking up on developments. And one is, of course, to do with registration. And it's not so much to do with the actual indicators, but it's the way the change in the service, particularly the registration of deaths in 5 days indicator, where because of the development of the Office of Medical Examiner, we've seen our percentage has gone down because we're one of the pilot authorities involved in that scheme. But from the, I think it was the 9th of September, the Medical Examiner Service for England and Wales, that's a national thing, so we should start to see figures showing a levelling off, and we'll get a true picture of where our current performance sits. The 90% target was always very difficult for every single authority. Our one was often in the high 70s and 80s% with the role of medical examiner, where it's obviously much lower now. And I think it's basically every death that's in a health setting that doesn't involve hasn't involved the coroner will be subject to the examination of the medical examiner. So that will happen nationally. But as a result of that, I've checked with Sharon Caldwell for this month's figures. So we've got a complete set of figures for this quarter, for Q1, and also for July and August. But so far, there's been no data release for September. So I'll keep the panel informed. It may well be that the General Register Office, it might just be 1 month where they're either delayed publishing their figures, or they might be changing the way that they're doing it at the moment, unless Hannah's had an update. I'm not aware that Sharon, she's checking with them, and we'll be able to provide the panel with an update as required. But that really explains the reasoning behind that performance figure that you see in the one graph, which is, as I say, registration of deaths within 5 days. In terms of the other indicators, I'm conscious that obviously there's a very detailed paper that you'll be having around libraries and library service provision, and my area doesn't really cover the HR side. I think if Richard Taylor was here today, he'd be able to pick up queries, but I'm happy to take any away that you may have. The other area, though, that's of interest, I think, and it would respond to a query that was raised at the last panel meeting where performance was on, was to do with the bikeability figures. And I understand, I think that Councillor May has had an update with Rachel Datlin about the figures and generally about the scheme. I think it might have been just this morning. And it was only that the point was raised at the last panel meeting about how good would the April and June figures be. And they're usually very good because, understandably, with the weather and the setting for schools, there are a lot of bookings received from schools for April to June. And they were very good figures. So the take-up on the scheme at the moment has been very good. The figures for April to June for the on-road training, it was the highest for a single quarter. And those are the figures. I'll get the page reference for you. They're on page 16, page 17, I think it is, actually, the graph, which shows the information about bikeability. And the figures for quarter two, it's already showing, it will follow the usual pattern. So we'll see very high figures April to June, as in previous years. Not as many in the summer holiday period, of course, July to September. And then there'll be a return. Bookings are being taken now for this quarter and the next one. But they won't be as high, but already the figures will exceed previous years. I think there's no doubt about that. So the take-up there has been very good. And we've also no other concerns on other areas with countryside. Their adherence to countryside site standards, so the monitoring of the standards there, everything to do with the way the sites are run, the maintenance of equipment, safety of equipment, signage, and the general tidiness of the countryside sites. Still a very high percentage there, and no real concerns. Again, that can be seasonal. It may well be that there would be times of the year where weather intervenes and inspections and ad hoc works might be more difficult to undertake, but in the quarter we're looking at now, there are no concerns around that. I think that's a very quick run through. I'm happy to try to pick up any queries that the panel may have, or to take any other way that, as I say, particularly with regards to the HR and sickness ones.
Okay, Natalie, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for my back. Although I love this chamber, it's not the most interpersonal of spaces, I'm afraid. So I'll do my best to look and speak into the mic. And so I'm actually articulating this question on behalf of another panel member. And it relates to page 11 of the report, which shows that Woodrow are actually smashing their footfall targets post-COVID, and are on target to increase even further based on quarter one's figures this time. So we're just wondering what they're doing to achieve this, and whether other libraries, including some of the larger libraries, can learn from what they're doing.
So, is it the right button? That right? Yes. Yeah, so, can we come back to that as part of the library's paper, just because we can bring Carol in then to answer it? I think, in short, it's an interesting question, and it's not an easy question, and it's not easy to answer because there isn't kind of a kind of conclusive explanation. But if we can park that and then come back to it when we're talking about library performance in a bit more detail. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Hannah. James.
That's it.
Thank you. Chair, thank you. I've got a couple of libraries questions, but happy to park those until the appropriate agenda item. In terms of countryside standards, I've got a particular interest now about weather intervention on this, because it's something we've spoken about many times in the past, and you know, we know that staff work incredibly hard to maintain our sort of estate, so to speak. But to what extent is the weather now, you know, really impacting on this, and potentially what could be done to mitigate that?
It's a good question. Some of it is in our control to do something about, i.e. give an example of the work that we've just done at our Worcester Woods Country Park, where we partnered with Public Health and Worcester City to resurface part of the path to basically make it more hard wearing, but kind of still falling in line with the habitat, etc. So we're not kind of concreting it, we're kind of using natural substances. And actually, when you walk around that park now, given the amount of rainfall that we've had, that area would be underwater. It's not. So that, you know, it's things like that that we have looked to do and kind of taken the opportunity as and when. A lot of our sites are on, the grass isn't cut, so they're kind of grown. You know, we leave things to to kind of grow as part of the kind of biodiversity work, and actually that then helps kind of disperse from a weather perspective. We're also looking at introducing things like new wetlands as part of the new farm development over Evesham Way, where we've planted a number of trees, quite a large number of trees, as part of the plan to kind of plant trees across the county. We've actually introduced some wetland area there as well, which then helps in terms of flood management. So yeah, it's an issue. We've had an awful lot of rain, or what feels like an awful lot of rain, but we do what we can, and continue to use the large number of volunteers as well in terms of management of the sites, in terms of keeping things on track around health and safety, etc.
Great, thank you. I guess the sort of follow up to that is, so there's new thinking coming into across authorities, I assume, and how we deal with an evolving situation in terms of weather and so forth. New products coming onto the market, how best they can be utilised to sort of alleviate what is a challenging situation. What sort of experience kind of discourse is taking place across authorities to manage what is rapidly becoming quite a serious sort of issue for us all going forward?
Okay, so I can only speak on behalf of the Countryside Centre Green Space area. There will be other work that happens elsewhere, like highways, etc., that I can't speak on behalf of. I know Rachel Datley, the head of service there, is linked into a network of her counterparts, etc., across the region and nationally. I wouldn't want to do her a disservice by answering that question in full. So if it's okay with you, I'll speak to Rachel, take the question and get a response back. Otherwise, I will be doing her a disservice by trying to answer that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Adrian.
Well, Chairman, as you would expect, my questions are about the bikeability grant, because I put down a question to the Cabinet member, and thank you very much indeed for her answer that I didn't really understand, to be honest, at full council, because it was quite complex. But of course, my concern basically is, although the figures are good and they are definitely improving, I still estimate there is a gap of about 2,000 primary school pupils who are not receiving training in any shape or form that are in the public sector, and therefore would be covered by either the free training or not. And so, I mean, the question that I would put to the Cabinet member, or maybe the Assistant Director, is, we obviously need another push at this to try and get every school lined up. And I also have a question about countryside centres, Jim.
Yeah, thank you for that, Adrian.
Answer that from an operational perspective. We have a large challenge this year of trying to train over 4,000 young people, year sixes, particularly around level 2, which is the closest you can get to the old cycle proficiency course that many of us will recognise. We continue to push that. It isn't a mandatory service, so people don't have to take it up, schools don't have to take it up, but in general we get a good buy-in from schools in terms of support. Last term and this term will quieten off just because of the weather related element, and then it will kind of pick back up in the spring. But take the point, Councillor Hardman, around continuing to push it, and I'll take that back to the team to make sure that we're marketing it and we've got our comms right, particularly to schools around year 6 pupils.
Thank you for that, Hannah. At Dodderhill, I paid for a little track with zebra crossing and things like that. Now, I know the courses that have been run there by the community. I don't think you get the figures from that community event, where it's not only for children, but it's for children and older people that haven't been used to riding push bikes. So I tried to get comms to cover that, to say what was going on, but they didn't want to do it because it was paid for out of my positive activities, and they said that wouldn't be right. Why, I don't know, but there you go. Karen.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor Hardman, for your question. It's not quite as straightforward as one would anticipate. You have to have the space to do it, the capacity with the teachers, etc. But as Hannah's just explained to you, yes, we will continue to push on this, but teachers often have capacity issues, be it in terms of the ability with teachers to actually take on this role or work with the class teacher to address the need, or actually the space. Bear in mind some of our rural schools, if you can't take them out onto the roads, etc. So you've got to work out a safe environment that they can actually go and learn how to ride their bikes proficiently. Work is ongoing, and I was really pleased to hear the work that Jackie Phillips and the team are doing in this space. We do reach out. It's not something we sit back on the data and say we accept this data. We actively go out and talk to the schools about what they can do in partnership with ourselves to provide this service. So it is an ongoing piece of work, and I was very pleased and grateful for the work that the team are doing. Thank you.
Adrian.
Well, I mean, Chairman, obviously we have a list of schools, or we will be able to work out a list of maintained schools before we even venture into the independent sector who are not taking it up. So, I mean, I would suggest that the targeting of this is actually going to be comparatively easy for us. I'm interested that the Cabinet member thinks rural schools are more of a challenge than schools in the city. I'm not too sure about that, but because I would expect that, certainly in Braden Hancock's you could easily take them out because it's on a no-through road. So, I mean, it does rather depend. But, I mean, I thank her for reassurance that, continue to work at this in a targeted way, because my real interest is, of course, that if we can get children cycling, and I know that she's a keen cyclist still, I think. Are you? Yeah, I think so. Or you do sometimes cycle, whereas I don't. It does set you on a path that is not only sustainable active travel, but of course very beneficial for health issues amongst our children. And looking at the latest obesity figures, if we can make them cycle, I'm sure it's a great thing.
Thank you, Adrian. I think we understand exactly what you were saying there, Karen.
Yeah, absolutely, and I understand what you're saying, but there's one school, for example, in Broadwas that they have to take to another area because they can't cycle from that site. It's not safe and secure for them to do so. That's just one local authority school that and how we address it. So on the face of it, you might say there are a few schools that don't actually offer their cycle levels 1, 2 or 3, but it is something we're actively working with partners to address because it is important. And also, there's a knock-on effect of this as well, because if you teach them to ride a bike effectively, hopefully they'll become responsible when they go on to drive a car and going back also as a pedestrian. Because as somebody who's recently introduced a toucan crossing up at St Kenelm's Primary School, I'm astounded how many parents don't actually adhere to the Green Cross Code as I know it when they cross over. And you have to remember, young people replicate the behaviour of adults. So this is a multifaceted, it's about discipline, it's also about independence, as well as the public health aspect about exercise. So yes, we will actively be encouraging our schools to join with us in partnership to move forward on this. But there are some, whilst you're astounded by, I had a really great briefing this morning, learning all about cycling and how these levels 1 and 2 and 3 work, but also about the safety aspect. And we have to remember that if it is a very rural environment, you don't necessarily, I can take a school in my county division that's on a hill like this, and to put children onto that road to do their cycle level 1 or 2 would be a grave concern to myself, so that they would have to be taken off site or into another secure area. Thank you. I'm not giving up on this, can you tell?
Thank you, Karen.
It's downhill from
Karen, would it be worth asking members, is there any bikeability that they know of within their division that may be by some other organisation? Because I'm pretty sure you didn't get the figures from what I financed. So it may be that it might be worth asking, and that may change the figures?
Absolutely. One would hope that the Bikeability Trust would have some of that data. But yes, I'm very happy to send an email out saying, could you let me know of any local schemes that you're running? At the end of the day, if we're doing something in partnership and it gets the right results, then it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I understand it's traffic. Yeah. Natalie.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just agreeing with the points that Karen has made around the challenges of some of our schools, but also for me it's the so what question. You know, we are teaching children and young people to be proficient cyclists using the terminology that I'm familiar with, but then what about when they're, you know, not at school? Where are our bike bus schemes and our, you know, our safer cycling, off-road cycling schemes and things like that? So we do need to think about connecting the dots up here. It's no good just training kids to be able to cycle around one little bit of an area that they know. They've got to be able to relate that and ride safely out in normal streets as well. Just wanted to make that point.
Would you like me to come back on that, Chairman? Because I absolutely agree with you. It's no good. You gain experience, don't you, from actually being out on the road. So it's working with highways colleagues to address what you've just said, Councillor McVeigh. Absolutely agree with you.
Thank you for that. Dave, I do have one question relating back to the registration of deaths. It from that through the pandemic, there must have been a sort of rise, and also a short time afterwards, there's possibly a rise in births as well, and so. And I see January 24 was births was up nearly 490. Yeah. Is there anything come back on that you can put a bit more meat on the bone?
There are certain seasonal factors as well, in terms of both for the births and also deaths, of course. But you're right, there was certainly with the registration of deaths reaching a peak during the pandemic. Off the top of my head, I think I can remember that there were certainly a couple of months at its peak where it was well in around 700 were registered during the one month. I think in terms of the births, there's a sense that things are getting back to the level that we saw sort of pre-pandemic and the usual patterns. But we'd have the data going back quite a few years, so I'll be able to provide that and give you a lot more historical data than's actually on the graphs there. Because as you say, it would then be the impact, of course, on the service in terms of you know, what they're having to deal with in terms of number of deaths registered, births, and also partnerships as well.
The reason I've asked that question is because there seems to be a falling off of input for schools. And schools like Sitchampton and Ombersley have actually asking, do children want to go to that school to keep the PAN numbers up? So that was the reason behind that question.
If I can just come back on that point, that we've seen the birth rate across the whole of Worcestershire drop off, but there are pockets like in Bromsgrove where the birth rate is very consistent. But there has been a reduction in the birth rate across the whole of the county, which will feed into Mr. Corbett's data.
Adrian.
Chairman, sorry, thank you very much indeed for your indulgence, because not being a member of the committee, I appreciate this. I just wanted to talk about countryside sites, because on Saturday, the leader of Wychavon District Council, myself, visited the one in Elmley Castle. Now that is, and we say here the service will continue to promote each site's natural attractions and facilities. The one in Elmley Castle is quite a small countryside site with a marvellous view over the cricket ground, but it calls itself a picnic site. And one of the great problems that we have in Elmley Castle, all the way from the pub to the school, is of course walkers who park in the high street, in the main street, sorry, not the high street. And on occasions, they are blocking the school buses. Now, if they could be persuaded to use what is called a picnic site, or before they go walking up the hill to park their motor vehicles, and there is parking probably for about 10 cars there, but I have yet to see a single person ever having a picnic there, or indeed a car park there. Now, I suspect part of it is due to the stream overflowing, but it would be helpful, I suspect, if somebody from the Countryside Service would be prepared to possibly meet me in Elmley Castle just to see what the options are.
We'll get the picnic police onto that, Chairman.
Yes.
I mean, if the Cabinet member wants to come and have a picnic, perhaps so she can familiarise herself with the site, I would suggest we wait till spring.
Always happy for a picnic, Councillor.
I'll look forward to that. Thank you. Okay. Any more questions?
We didn't ask you.
In my days, you always needed a chaperone.
In this instance, it's a referee.
Okay, we have no more questions. So,
So we go on to the finance. So
Yep.
Steph, if you...
so Steph, you're going to go and give us the numbers, I believe.
Absolutely, and I'll join you on the picnic. I'll bring my whistle. So I'm going to be talking to you this afternoon, ladies and gents, about the financial position not only of the corporate and communities areas, but also of the council as a whole. So as I do with all panels, I'll take you through the corporate financial position, i.e. the position for the whole of the council, and then the areas that are of particular importance to this panel for scrutiny. So from page 19 onwards in your printed pack, you'll see a set of slides in purple, if they're printed out, just a horrible shade of grey if not. You will see that we have got a financial position at the moment at the end of Q1 for the County Council of an overspend on its revenue budget of just over 3%, and that equates to about 14 million. Work is underway at County at the moment to try and mitigate that position, and all directors and assistant directors are working on mitigation strategies, overspending similar areas than you will have seen before in our demand-related services, adults, children's and home-to-school transport. However, for the first time in a long time, we are seeing some overspends in corporate services, but in the main, they're due to not achieving our vacancy management saving targets, but also the impact of having to vacate County Hall. So with that is obviously the loss of income from our tenancies, and also the work that we need to do to undertake our remedial activities within County Hall. So slide 20 and onwards up to 22 gives you a little bit more detail about that. I then give you a slide that tells you about the savings that we are achieving as a council. We set the budget with £37.2 million worth of savings, a huge saving target, biggest one that I've seen in my tenure here. And we are in the process of delivering around 72% has already been rated green as delivered or on track to be delivered. There are areas that are rated red and they're included within our overall overspend. And again, alternative strategies are being reviewed to implement alternatives to that. Previous panels have asked me for information relating to reserves. So on page 24, you'll see the current year and the forecast use of reserves over the next 2 financial years. This is assuming that we have to use reserves to offset the overspend. So it assumes that the overspend isn't mitigated by other savings. It's using our sort of savings account, if you want, our reserves. We talk a little bit about the capital programme, very small amount of capital programme relevant to this particular panel, but there are areas of property and ICT which have a capital programme, and we are trying our best to eke that capital programme out for as long as possible by not replacing our IT kit and our equipment year on year. We're only replacing them when we need to, but also making sure that our digital strategy is fit for purpose for the future. And then there's a slide relating to the indicative medium-term financial plan. As with every local authority, the funding formulas and the financial planning for the future remains uncertain, and we're all eagerly awaiting the current government's announcements at the end of this month relating to funding for not only local government but the whole of the public sector. So at the moment, trying to plan future financial years is very difficult, but we are starting that process. So information relating to this particular panel starts on page 29, and as you'll see, there's areas of the directorates that are overspending, in particular property services, which I've mentioned is due to the loss of income from trading.
Steph, can I just, before we go on to page 29 and go on that, are there any questions on what we've just... No? Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just referring back to page 21. I know we've done a lot to reduce adults and child social care budgets, home to school transport, but it still poses quite a significant challenge. So I'm wondering, is there any more work within the pipeline to reduce this? I mean, very sad case, but I was at somebody's home on Tuesday, and whilst the case itself I'm not going to discuss today, what astounded me, there's £40,000 going into this child's education, and she attends school 12% of the time. You know, and I'm just wondering, how can we take control of this adult social and childcare budget and the home to school transport, because we all have experience of some of it not being as implemented probably as fairly as it should be, and there's many reasons behind that. So I'd just like a view on that.
Okay, well obviously I can't give you an operational view as a finance lead, but what I can say is funding for schools is a completely separate funding formula. Not that I'm saying that it's right that we don't spend it in the correct way, but education funding, to what you were saying as a young person attending school, is not part of the children's social care budget. It's part of the education.
So it's a send case, this one.
It doesn't matter. Okay. It's still a separate funding stream, so it's not our county council revenue account. Notwithstanding the fact it's still public money, it comes through a separate grant, which indeed itself is overspending. So absolutely take your point that we need to make sure that we're spending the right money in the right place with the right provision for the relevant child. I happen to sit on all the other scrutiny panels, and I'm able to provide financial information and support to them. So I do know that within the adults panel, we are looking at work with our market to attempt to put frameworks in place, so purchasing through frameworks rather than spot purchasing, to enable us to try and bring our prices down. We're doing some work at the adult front door to signpost people when they come and come to the front door, if you want to try to enable them to get their support through the community if possible. Obviously, if they meet the Care Act requirements, we need to provide some support through adult social care. Home to school transport, we're looking at different provision methodologies, whether that be use of our own in-house minibuses, taxis, leasing vehicles ourselves rather than using contracts. Using, you may know particularly in this area, the on response transport, the DRT transport services, looking at that extension of that to avoid having to use home to school transport itself. So there are a lot of things that we are doing as a local authority and with our partners to attempt to mitigate overspends within all of those services. And I can absolutely guarantee you, every panel that I sit on, they're having the same challenge. Not that I'm disputing your challenge, absolutely.
Of course.
So all of those individual panels, and home to school transport is indeed on the children's panel as well. So that's quite an interesting panel to sit on. Other areas, obviously, that we are looking at is ensuring, as you rightly say, that we get the right service to the right people at the right time, and also that we assess people's ability to pay for those services. So again, looking at the benefits that our clients are entitled to receive. So if they're receiving benefits, then I suppose it makes it easier for us to charge them for their care if they're receiving benefits. So again, it gives them a benefit as well. So my financial answer is we are doing as much as we possibly can, and I'm hearing operational colleagues doing as much as they can. But Hannah manages the adult front door, so may have alternative operational things you can add to that, Councillor.
Just to add to that, so obviously obviously I sit as part of the Adult and Communities Directorate, so sit alongside Kerry McCrossan and Rebecca Wassel as my Assistant Director counterparts. Because of the challenges that we've got from a budget perspective within adults, we've introduced, we don't like using the term panel, but for want of a better word, where we are scrutinising spend over £500. So really kind of making sure that every package of care that there's a request for, we are making sure that it is the most appropriate, most cost effective, etc. So, you know, taking that budget challenge really really seriously, and I've actually taken the decision-making responsibility off managers as a result of that, which was a significant selling point in terms of people coming to work for us. So that, you know, that is action that we're taking, and within the service that I manage through the Adult Front Door, we are carrying out more strength-based conversations at the very earliest stage. And what I mean by that is talking to individuals about what they can do rather than what they can't, and looking to see whether we can get the support in place for them without needing adult social care, so to prevent, reduce or delay that. And, you know, over a period of time, we've actually increased the number of individuals that we've been able to support to prevent going into adult social care by 23%. So, you know, that is having an impact. And if you were able to put a price on that, we're obviously cost avoiding, so we haven't spent the money, we're avoiding spending it, but it is having the impact and helping us keep our growth figures down.
Thank you for explaining that. Thank you. Craig, are you happy with that, or would you like some more details on that?
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had one short follow-up question, and you know, I did like the answers, and it seems that we are doing plenty to try to mitigate this or reduce the impact. And it is important, I think, because we do have a responsibility to all of our tax contributors across Worcestershire. And I just wanted one question. What is the percentage of Worcester County council tax receipts that we spend on adult and child social care?
That's a great question. And I can give you a very complicated answer or a very simple answer. Adults and children's social care takes up broadly about 60% of our net budget. Our net budget is funded by council tax, and the social care element is about 60%. There's other elements, which is public health, education, so wider adults and children's spend is around 70%.
Yeah.
The pure social care element, provision of placements, provision of adult social care assessments, is around 60%. So it depends on what you look at. If you look at the whole of children and adults together, including community services, public health, comes to about 70%. If you look at purely social care for children and adults, it comes to about 60%. Now that is 60% of the net budget. The net budget is covered by council tax and business rates.
Yeah.
So what I can't do is say how much of your council tax, because I could say all your council tax goes on adults and all your business rates goes on children's. It doesn't. It goes into a big bucket basically. So it all goes into the bank account and we spend out of that bank account. We don't do it out of separate buckets. But on average, 60% of the council tax and business rates, i.e. the collectible income from people who pay for us to operate, is on adults and children's social care.
And do you know how many?
Thank you for that.
Do you know how many people are that's covering the 60%? Yeah.
Yes, there's just over 6,000 adults that are receiving social care of some form or another. There are just over 1,000 looked after children. There are a number, and I can't give you the number, but I will get you the number of children in need and children on a child protection register. And again, taking your point earlier, children who are subject to special education needs and disabilities, education, health and care plans, lots of words there, there's around 5,000 to 6,000. But I will get you those through the Scrutiny.
Thank you, Steph.
Clocks, the precise answers to all.
Karen, you had.
Thank you very much indeed. If you can hear me, it's now gone red. Councillor Warhurst, I've asked this questions on many occasions, and my understanding is that, as Mrs Simcox has just said, 70% of the budget is spent on around 2.5% of our population. Now, if you actually look at what we're doing in terms of public health, coming on to libraries at one of the next items here in this agenda, it's about what you utilise those assets to do to prevent people entering the system and enable them to live more independent lives. So I fundamentally think that's how we have to try and get ahead of the curve. Strength and balancing classes, we know in your 30s, 40s and 50s have a massive payback if you're lucky enough to reach your 70s, 80s and 90s. But it's that healthy lifestyle, it's about reduction of alcohol, it's about actually that social interaction, and libraries, as we all know, are a great place to prevent social isolation. So thank you, Chairman, but it's very clear that this agenda has been well set up to cover off many of the points about the community in its entirety.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Adrian, I think you had a quick one, didn't you?
Well, just a very quick question for Steph, and you'd think I'd know this, but I'm afraid to say I've forgotten. We have a line that is marked in the reserve section. So I am on page, I can't remember what page I'm on, but I suspect you know. Yeah, 4, which is marked insurance. Now, I noticed that as in 2025, we're going to end up with presumably an estimate of 5 million, and that will drop to 3. But is it my understanding that we're still self-insuring, and therefore that is to cover an eventuality? So does that, so the drop in reserves, does it mean that we've had incidents where we've had to pay out self-insurance, or are we lowering the insurance reserve deliberately? Does that make sense?
It absolutely does make sense, Adrian. Sorry, Councillor, forgetting myself. With the insurance reserve, we are holding money aside in case, as we do with most reserves. And you're absolutely right, we self-insure. So we have, as with every person who insures their home and their car, we have an excess that we have to pay. So anything over £250,000, we claim on the insurance. Anything under £250,000, we self-insure, we pay ourselves. So in effect, there's an excess value, and that excess value is huge. It means that we can keep our insurance price down, exactly the same as we would at home. If we have to pay out, it comes out of the reserve because we're self-insured. If we're claimed against, we will challenge and try not to have to pay. We will often get lawyers involved, and we tend to repudiate about 98% of the claims. So we are very, very good at doing that. Last year, we had some huge claims against us, and we ended up spending just over 2 million of our reserve. This year, we've been very good at pushing a lot back, and we haven't had a lot of claims. In fact, we've won a claim, an insurance claim, that means we're going to get some money back from another, and I won't quote who it is. So it's one of those things where you never quite know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you don't know whether the roof's going to blow off your house in a storm, but you are insured, but you have to pay your excess. It's exactly the same with us. So I'm taking an estimate based on the last 3 years of claims that have happened, and I'm saying if they happen again, which they won't, there'll be different ones, what's the drawdown from reserve? So my hope is that doesn't go down.
Yeah.
That's my hope, but it's likely it will. But I can't guarantee you the figure it'll go down by.
Thank you.
So we're not
Thank you for that.
using it as a balancing item.
Okay, thank you, Adrian.
Absolutely not, no. So if you're happy with the first bit, I'll go on to the bit relating to corporate and communities. Is that all right? So just very, very briefly, because I know you've got a huge agenda this afternoon, and although I think this is really exciting, I'm sure you've got more important things to be chatting about relating to libraries. But moving on to corporate and communities, what we have, as I mentioned slightly earlier on, we have an overspend in the area of property services due to our tenancy income. Small overspends in other areas of the corporate directorate, explanations of which are given on page 30. Our overall corporate budgets, these are our borrowing and lending and depreciation budgets. We're making an overall saving on them, which is great news for the County Council, because we have received a lot of grants in advance, so we're able to lend that money out on the money market and earn some interest, which is helping to offset some of the overspends in services elsewhere. I talked earlier on about the non-delivery of savings. They're held obviously in the corporate services area, and we're showing just over 4.8 million of non-achieved corporate savings. And then community services, very small elements of overspend within community services, mainly in the area of registration and coroner, and that's due to staffing savings not being achieved through the vacancy management target. But broadly, communities is balancing its budget broadly very well so far this year. Again, this was based on the end of June figures, and I'll be with you again in November, tail end of November, to be talking about the Q2 figures. From my recollection of numbers this morning that I was looking at, there's nothing dramatically different in Q2 from Q1. So we're not getting worse. That's it from me, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. And Natalie?
Yeah, I'm hesitating whether to ask this one, Steph, or not, because I don't know if it's appropriate to our directorate. But when we're having government kind of funding coming in for things like Household Support Fund, that's then maybe going out to the districts to spend, where might we see kind of income and expenditure details, or would we see that in this type of information? Yeah, I just haven't seen it before, and I wondered whether it should be here and whether we should be getting reports on Household Support Fund and expenditure.
Again, great question, and absolutely right to bring it here, because it is part of the Communities Directorate. So if you have a look on page 33, you will see within the Communities and Partnerships line, there's 1.511 million as the gross budget. That includes the grants that we're getting for Household Support Fund. So the gross budget is the total amount of cash that area receives, irrespective of where the cash comes from. The net budget is 300, I have to turn my glasses on and off, 373,000. The difference between the two is income. So it's income from grant or income from people who are paying for our services. So that's where we hold the Household Support Fund. Some of it goes, as you rightly say, to districts, some of it we administer ourselves through schemes, and Hannah's World manages that as well.
Just for info, we are almost there in publishing the latest record of officer decision relating to the latest round of Household Support Fund. So Mark Fitton, the director, will sign that off and get that published. He's got delegation from a previous cabinet decision that was made. So we're in Household Support Fund 6 now, same amount of money that we've received from Worcestershire perspective, and broadly following the same trend in terms of how that's distributed. But if the panel wants to know more about that, then I'm more than happy to come and talk about it.
Thank you both. I'm glad I didn't ask an inappropriate question, but if I may, I know we're not talking about the future work plan, but I would quite like to see a report on Household Support Funding if I forget to ask later. So thank you for that offer.
We'll bring that back at the end. Yeah. And thank you for that. That was informative. From reading through the agenda, it was nice to have it explained a little more detail. Thank you. Okay, we now look at item 6. Marketing libraries. And
Shall I kick off, which will allow the changeover, the seamless changeover of staff, and
yes.
Carol, the head of service for libraries, archives and archaeology, to take a seat. And Carol's the author of the report, so we'll be able to go
Thank you,
through it in
Hannah.
more detail. What I will say at the start is that really welcome this item, because actually putting the report together was a really good opportunity to showcase some of the fantastic work that's happening within libraries, and just some of the recovery that and the change in the way that libraries are being utilised and membership, etc. It gave us as officers the opportunity to just pause and reflect and take stock of what's happening. So have I padded out enough? Yeah, okay, brilliant. I'll pass over to Carol, who'll go through the report.
Okay, so I think it's fair to say that in the library service we do recognise that effective comms and marketing are central to achieving our strategic ambition of engaging a wide and representative audience for library services. However, we also acknowledge the role played by partnership working and new service delivery models in reaching a more representative audience and increasing service participation. So comms and marketing don't stand alone. I pointed out in the report that Worcestershire libraries are recovering well post-COVID. And I personally believe that library comms and marketing have played a part in that. In a restructure that we did in 2020, we decided to spend some money on having a dedicated comms role. So we have 28 hours a week of content creative time supporting libraries to promote their services. However, we are by no means resting on our laurels, and our ambition to further grow the library audience absolutely continues to drive our service planning and our development activity. And I suppose it's fair to say that our communication initiatives seek to do a lot of things. We want to retain our existing library customers, we want to re-engage lapsed customers, and we want to attract new customers, very important. And broadly, that's by raising awareness of the full range of services and both services and their benefits, both for customers and for partners. So I've set out the range of channels that we use, which is quite a wide range of channels, although, as I pointed out, largely free. We don't have a budget for marketing, although we have some budget for the content creative person who supports us. And that is what it is across these channels that we look to attract our audience and engage them more. And we certainly make efforts as well to ensure that we engage with digitally excluded residents by making sure that not all of our comms is digitally based. It's fair to say that work is ongoing to improve our library comms and marketing. And the report identifies some recent and planned improvements in this area, and also highlights some of this year's campaigns, both for new services and for core services. It's actually quite hard. We're delivering quite a lot of new services, so it becomes quite hard to cover absolutely every service that we provide, but we do our best. I think it's quite difficult to evidence the direct impact of comms and marketing. But the report does identify some campaigns that appear to have made quite a notable difference to, have made quite a notable contribution to increasing take-up of our services. And I've also provided an appendix which sets out examples of the work undertaken by local libraries to build a more representative audience for library services, because a lot of the work that is done at a local level, and this will come back to the question that was asked earlier about Woodrow, this goes a huge way to engaging new audiences. So whilst comms and marketing absolutely is important, the work done by library teams in local libraries has a massive impact on the number of new members that we attract and in attracting a more representative audience. So I've given you some examples of that. That's by no means the full list of everything that's going on, but it does give a flavour of the types of activity that are taking place across the service. So I think that's broadly it. You know, I believe that I do not feel we are doing everything that can be done in terms of comms and marketing, but we are doing a lot, given our sort of like our resource envelope, as it were, to increase our profile, to raise our profile, and to increase participation and engagement with the service. However, we are always welcoming of new ideas and suggestions on how we can do things better to meet our strategic goals.
Thank you for that. And I would like to mention the volunteers. special thanks to those people that do volunteer in our libraries. I know from people I speak to that it's very and interaction between different age groups. So and all of you too. Karen, did you want to?
No, I think this is a really good report. It gives some illustrations to how we do market the libraries. Libraries are more than just about borrowing a book today. As you said, and you alluded to about the volunteering. Volunteering is good for the volunteer, but it's also good for our service, and it's that interaction. And often the volunteers that I witness at Hagley Library, for example, know the community. They know the person that's coming through the door, and they're able to pick up on if there's issues. You know, one of our visitors once wasn't very well, a few weeks ago wasn't very well in the library, and they were able to get that individual the care that they required. It's about knowing your population. And I think the marketing of the libraries is something, yes, we build on, but also it's that this Open for Libraries programme we've got at the moment. The number of librarians have said to me this is the right way to go because it enables the public to come when technically it's closed, but they can still go and take library books back. And many students are studying in out of hours. It's a quiet space for them. I also think there's some opportunity around the warm space offer that we've got coming down the line, particularly with the winter fuel allowance being cut from our older population. This is a great preventative action, and I think as a council we have to be very proactive in the preventative space, and this completely feeds into it. So I thank Carol and the team for the work they've done on this and will do going forward. It's really, really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Had a young man from who's doing a university course, and he wanted help buying a PC for his CAD work, and I wasn't able to get him financial assistance through what we do at county. And of course you can't use your positive activity for individuals either, but I managed to get him a laptop bought with CAD on, and it was a nice laptop, Apple laptop with CAD on, from one of the parochial charities that I sit on. But his one comment was, "Thank you so much." He said, "But it's taken me so long because I couldn't find out." He said it wasn't easy to go into the library and see who my counsellor was or who the counsellors are around here. And so I don't know whether the libraries could sort of help with that for that sort of information.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. More than happy to put a list of the local councillors into the libraries. I think it's really important.
I think, James, you were first.
Chair, thank you. Firstly, great report, particular paragraph 17, which is a really good indication of the way forward here. Getting more people, particularly working age, using their libraries is absolutely fantastic. The question relates to paragraph 16 and the concern that I still have about the participation in my own area and how much we can tailor demographic profiling to make our offer, and the marketing of our offer much more effective in those areas that are got particular challenges. I don't know whether officers have any thoughts on those.
We do look at a very local level when we do our annual review of representation. So Dave here provides us with socio-economic data and age profiling data on each local library. So, and these figures here that are, the figures included in the report are very much county-wide, but they completely mask quite big differences in different, in age representation and socio-economic representation at a local level. And that's where the strength of the local work comes in, because it's those people in sort of like working in the local library that know which partners to work with. They get the data that Dave pulls together. They see that I mean, Woodrow, for example, sorry not to preempt your question, but Woodrow, you know, Michelle Campbell, who's the library manager for the Redditch cluster, she works extremely hard to engage underrepresented groups, and in Woodrow that was young children for quite a while, and has done a huge amount of work with them. And so bringing whole classes in is one of the many things that has boosted the visitor numbers there. So the power of that work So I just want to reassure you that that is happening at a local library level, that we're looking at those indicators. But it is just age and socioeconomic group at present.
Right, we've got Chris next and then Craig.
Something I should probably know the answer to but don't is, in conjunction with our districts, are we promoting our libraries as warm space?
Yeah, for a couple of years now, or since the sort of like warm space initiative was introduced, we've been in touch with the organisation that records the local warm spaces. So all of Worcestershire libraries have individually sat on that warm spaces directory, which is a national directory. And also local libraries run warm space and warm welcome events and use local funding sometimes to provide refreshment. Again, I don't have a list, but there's a lot of activity taking place at a local level, and sort of like as a service, we very much are represented on that directory, as it were.
Craig?
Yes, sorry. I think really good report, and I sat on a panel some time ago where we reviewed the marketing, and you can see, you know, we're making a big impact, and I think it's a big credit to you. But nonetheless, we are 1 million down pre-COVID, so there is a pot to go for. And I think we can do so much more. And the irony is that a lot of the answers actually sit within the paper. You know, in Appendix 1, there are a number of fantastic initiatives across individual districts' libraries. Really, really good initiatives. Now, I think just by picking them up and trying to run with them pan-Worcestershire, that could add some footfall. I also see libraries as more than just reading a book, renting a book. You know, they can be that warm space. But for me, in all of our wards, right across Worcestershire, we've got many, many different groups, charities, networks, clubs that do so much good in our areas, or just get together to have some fun. And they need space. And one of the things you mentioned was that we've got 28 hours spent on marketing. And to me, that doesn't feel right. We've got 24 libraries, 28 hours, at best an hour per library per month. And really to get into the nitty-gritty of a locality to understand, you know, what is required in Redditch, in Bromsgrove or in Malvern. You know, there'll be different requirements. Some we can push across all libraries and others will be quite unique to an area. So I do think there's a lot more. I also think things like the NHS support services, health, that kind of theme. I'm not necessarily saying NHS, but you know, that kind of supportive theme can be perfectly well placed in a library. It also gives a library footfall, can bring in some revenue, and get some use more use out of the library. I think promoting activities and approaching groups will be a great way to go, and to try to sort of develop a library as a community hub. And that's you know, for me, that's what its place is. That'll get us the footfall. People will continue to read books, but you know, there's no reason why we shouldn't be smashing that 1 million that we're down pre-COVID and doubling where we are today by having the right sort of community offer. So I just have some thoughts on that, please.
So agree. I think that we have to remember that our e-book issues absolutely significantly rose throughout COVID. So we are seeing a change of the way that people access services. So, you know, we're still obviously getting a huge, you know, footfall through, but we've also, you know, dramatically increased our e-book issue as well. So, you know, we have to balance that out. Now, I couldn't agree more in terms of, you know, libraries first, libraries as community hubs, you know, as warm spaces, etc. You know, it's the reason why Carol and I kind of love the job that we do because of that. However, there is a balance to be had. You know, we also have a duty to make sure that we stay within budget, that we manage that most effectively, and you know, with that, from an operational perspective, you get difficult decisions about how you prioritise that resource. We took the decision back when the library strategy was agreed to invest money into you know, a communication role, and we did that, and I think that it's packing its punch as a result of that. And the report says, if we were to invest more, we'd have to take that from somewhere else, and it's now having to really try and strike that balance. Hence the reason why we are very fortunate with our library managers. You know, they're community leaders in their own right. You know, they're out and about talking to you know, local groups, etc., and being able to kind of, you know, sell the message around, you know, a library being that community asset space. But yeah, in short, I agree with you, but there is that kind of balance to be had from an operational perspective around, you know, we can only do what we can do with the resource that we've got available.
Can I just add just a couple of points? One, to reassure you that actually at a local level, whilst we do whilst we do have a comms person who works with us on sort of like wider campaigns, local libraries have their own social media accounts. They also, as Karen pointed out, know their communities very well and work with these organisations who send out, you know, free press, as it were, and free leaflets, etc. So because the strength comes from their knowledge of the community, and they are doing their own communication. That it isn't, we're not relying on a central pool. It is like a combination of central resource and everything that's happening at a local level. And then my sort of other point really is just the thing that makes me most pleased about the recovery data is that new library members that we are now getting more library members than we were before the pandemic. And what that I mean, it's 106% recovery, so you know it's not like soared above, but it's one of the few indicators that has passed previous levels, and I think that's a really strong indicator that what we're doing essentially and what the libraries are doing locally is that we're bringing new people in at a higher rate than we were prior to the pandemic. So that kind of feels just something I'm happy about.
Thank you, Natalie.
Oh, thank you. Whenever we talk about libraries, I'm always on the edge of thinking, should I declare an interest? Because I am such a huge advocate for libraries. Most of you know that I worked for libraries for a long time. I can't remember how long. And to see how libraries have diversified their operating models over that 15 probably years plus that I was working there, really, I think shows it's demonstrated in this report, and I'm really pleased that you enjoyed putting it together because I think it is all really positive and I think it's a great report. I also think that we've got a role to play as members, and you know, so my question back to everybody here is what are you doing to promote your libraries in your division, and how are you involved in your libraries in your division? Because actually I see a lot of positive comms coming out about my libraries in the Malvern Hills district. So yeah, please everybody play a role.
Thank you, Natalie. Well, I've probably got one of the oldest libraries in my division. It's a chain library at Hartlebury Castle. So that's good. But remember, in our work programme, we are going to be looking at libraries and what we can do to expand the welcoming and knowledge of libraries. So that will be coming back in our work programme. So we will be probably asking you to come to us again, and so we can relook at that and see how we can promote. But and mobile library now, we haven't got that anymore, have we?
We do, and we're just investing, or we are in the process of investing in a e-mobile library. So we put an application in for some external funding. We were lucky to get that, and are purchasing an electric vehicle which will help keep it on the road a bit longer.
It's not a bike, is it?
No, it's a proper bus. A proper bus. So yeah, watch this space. Due to come 2025.
Yes, towards the end of
Yeah, because I know it used to park outside my house at one time. I used to go and offer the guy a cup of tea when I was there, but yeah, I haven't seen it for some time. Yeah, but look forward to that. Thank you, Adrian.
Well, Chairman, you've given me the link because obviously there isn't a library in the Breedon division. You know, a lot of Breedon residents tend to catch the bus or go into Tewkesbury and use the Gloucestershire County Council service. And it is bizarre how serendipity, comes into one's life, because July I was asked by Breedon Parish Council when the mobile library came, and I have to say I did slightly struggle. I thought it was, the second Thursday in every month is the answer that I got, but they said to me last night, actually, well done, Adrian, in getting an advert and putting all the times out so clearly in the excellent parish magazine. So many thanks for this this bit of marketing that you've done for the mobile library, because it is a great community asset, strangely. I mean, I do see the same people, and they tend to be of a certain age in Westman Case, who are stood there waiting for the library to come up from Breedon. I've even seen my daughter there, actually, which is quite interesting. And it does a great service, around the hill. And so this little bit of publicity, and I think you're doing going to all the right places. I'm a bit surprised you don't go to Boone Street or the other side of the railway line in Eckington, but people can easily cross over and go to Upper Andalslemmer if they so wish. But I mean, many thanks for this very discreet bit of marketing that you did, because the timing of it was perfect. And they all thought I was so clever, but I had actually entirely forgotten about it.
Thank you for that. And Natalie, there was a question that you were going to ask, which we were going to come back to.
Oh, no, I think actually that's been answered during this conversation. I think it's all around those local community links with library managers, isn't it, really? And looking at what the needs of that community are. You might call it an asset-based community development approach, I think, that libraries are taking, as several councils do. But I just wanted to make a final point that I think we can all be very proud of, that our plan is not to close any of our libraries. When we're facing library closures across the country, and long may that continue, I think this county council values libraries and the library staff, and certainly sees them as more than just books. I don't like that just books phrase, but they are such important kind of the heartbeat of communities, really, I would say. And so I would like to thank the Conservative administration of Worcestershire County Council for committing to keeping those libraries open, and long may it continue.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And as I say, we will be looking at libraries in our work plan. So no doubt we'll look forward to seeing you again. Thank you very much. Thank you. And now we look at agenda item 7.
Just a bit of a change over with the officers.
Yeah.
And these two gents have come over here.
This is Jeff Hedges and
Paul Harbison, the one who's
Harbison, yeah. Thank you, Karen. And we're at agenda item 7 now. Performance of comments and complaints. Jeff Hedges and Paul Hobson, thank you very much for coming, and I think you are going to take us through the first part of this, are you?
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
I'll provide a short summary of the report, and then happy to take any questions. So firstly, to say that we've been working really closely with the local government and social care ombudsman over the past year, looking to work towards improving our performance in terms of providing remedies within the required timescales, which has been an area of focus in the annual letter from the local government ombudsman. for the past few years. We've also been working on providing satisfactory remedies before complaints actually escalate to the local government social care ombudsman. The local government ombudsman has acknowledged this in their annual letter this year in terms of our improved performance and our sustained engagement with their assistant ombudsman throughout the year, which we're continuing to do. We've now also fully launched our new representations management system, which replaces our old legacy application and database for handling comments, compliments and complaints. And that's now fully embedded across the organisation and working really well. In terms of statistics, we are seeing an increase in complaints across all services, but that is in line with an increase in demand across council services as well. I'm pleased to say, though, that we're also seeing an increase in the number of compliments that we're receiving in line. I should also just highlight that we spotted this morning, and apologies for this, that there was an admission on a couple of figures in the report, specifically in the table underneath paragraph 30, which is the unique number of complainants for corporate complaints, and we will get that corrected and updated for you.
Before you,
Sure.
you go on there, Jeff, for members on page 53, top of page 53, if you want to jot the numbers in, 2324, stage 1 207, stage 2 54, local government social care ombudsman 3, total 264. So now you've updated to what we
Thank you.
should be having. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, I was just going to say that overall we've seen an improvement in our KPI performance in terms of the timescales in which we have to complete complaints within, and that's been a year-on-year improvement over the last few years. Nothing else to add, Paul, unless you wanted to add anything at that point. I'll happily take questions. Thank you.
Paul, Jeff, I do have a question. The Ombudsman's reply to us, it's how many years has that not been sort of the glowing report that I would like to see?
Sorry, it's been for the past 5 years, I believe, isn't it, Paul? That they've raised that in their annual letter. We have picked that up, as we said, in the last 12 months by meeting on a monthly basis or quarterly basis, sorry, with the assistant ombudsman, and yes, up until very recently, we'd achieved compliance throughout the rest of this year. There's only been a case recently, I believe, where we've missed that timescale. So performance has improved, but it is dependent upon the business responding to those complaints in a timely fashion and providing the remedies in a timely fashion as required by the ombudsman. And we can only go as far as the business come back to us on those timescales.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, personally, I've noticed since the pandemic that we've gone through the complaint. I don't know whether the councillors have found it as well, but the complaints I've had come in have been far greater than ever before, and I think people have had time to sit down at home and see what's happening around them and think a lot more. But you can, and I can relate to the complaints with families and children, because it's a very emotive subject, and also with our highways as well. So I would expect those figures to be sort of bumpy along those sort of areas. Are there any other areas which you would like to highlight?
I'll pass to Paul at that point, as he's closer to the data than I am.
So, yeah, as has been said, there has been an increase in the number of ombudsman complaints, mainly across special education needs. That is the majority of the complaints really that are coming from the ombudsman. And just to note, as a matter of interest, the ombudsman, although remedies are deemed separately as a late response, they do also report on late responses. So when the ombudsman is looking to gather information and gather evidence from the council, even if the council asks for an extension to the timescale that the ombudsman gives, and there are legitimate reasons for that, it might be that one particular officer needs to be seen and they might be on leave, the Ombudsman deems that as a late response, even if it is just an extension of 1 day.
Yeah, thank you for that, Paul. And I want to ask the awkward question now. Has the response improved or got worse with working from home?
There hasn't really been any evidence and any difference that I've seen. Obviously, the complaints that the Ombudsman receives, or in fact the complaints that we receive, can be quite complex. So you might be talking, there might only be one, what we class as a complaint point, so one issue that they have the complaint regarding, whereas you might have a complaint that is regarding 50 complaint points, and we do have instances where we have those. And it depends then on the area that that complaint covers, because it could include, for example, my main role is adult social care. So for adult social care, it could be a complaint regarding an area social work team. It could be a complaint also regarding care contribution assessment, finance team as a whole, and safeguarding. So when the Ombudsman is asking for evidence, then as the link officer, I'm liaising with different officers, different teams, because the Ombudsman only wants to receive one response with all the information contained within it. They're not happy with like being drip-fed response.
Thank you for that, Paul. Craig.
Thank you again, Chair. Just lots of information, lots of tables, lots of graphs and data. So I just want to focus on one section, which is 20, because I think it gives a view of where complaints kind of come from, and picking up on the first two, general lack of communication, staff attitude, behaviour, that represents about 40% of the complaints, and that is a gift that we have to resolve in terms of training. In the district, I was a cabinet member for housing, and I found when we first took over housing, bear in mind we own 6,400 homes, the officers got a little bit numb to some of the complaints. Some of them are very, very valid complaints, real serious issues, and some of them are, you know, there are issues behind the issue, which you need to get in. But I did find that officers have got a bit numb. We did a lot of training and a lot of sort of rebranding to help improve that, because it, you know, across all the complaints, if you get on to make an inquiry and you get a lack of communication or bad attitude or behaviour, it now becomes a major complaint because people get angry in that process. So I'd just like to get your views on the nature of complaints. Bullet point 20. Some of them, you know, I could, for instance, quality and timeliness of a social worker assessment. There's probably 1,000 reasons for that, and it can be very complicated what social workers have to do. Yes, they need to do things in a certain amount of time, but they also need to do it very safely and securely and make sure that the person they're protecting is protected. But the top two is the ones that I really want to discuss. So, thank you.
Thank you for that, Craig. I was in the office last week, and a complaint came in, and the staff member was very good, very calm. The resident on the phone was not letting it go. Yeah. This poor lady at the end of the thing, she was in tears.
Yeah.
Now, for a member of the public to treat our staff like that is totally unacceptable.
Absolutely, we should cut them off.
But to cut off would have been another complaint at the time. So she went on and dealt with it, and the way she dealt with it, admirable. Yeah. Really was. But felt very. In fact, I went and bought her a packet of biscuits.
Very nice.
So yeah. So Jeff, you.
Thank you for the question. So firstly, just for clarity, the stats in that section 20 relate to children's complaints only, not all complaints.
Okay.
There's a further table below in each section for other areas of complaints for children's social care and corporate complaints. But it's a valid point, it's a really good point. And it's one which, since I've taken on responsibility for the consumer relations team, it's one that I kind of struggle with in a sense, because as a team we're responsible for processing and handling the complaint and getting the relevant part of the business to respond to that complaint and provide a remedy if required. But we have no control over how the service is delivered in the first place, or how they go about necessarily applying the lessons and improving them. We do follow complaints through to ensure that lessons are learnt, and we identify those and record those against the complaint. But again, it's difficult for us to actually see that through with the business in terms of taking that learning forwards. So yeah, I agree with your point. I don't necessarily have a complete, total answer for you in terms of how we solve it.
Yeah, just to say that obviously as part of the complaints process, learning is identified. What you also need to see that with those descriptions, they are the complainant's view as to how they've been treated. If you then also look at whether that complaint is upheld or not upheld, that's obviously the findings of the officers that do the complaint investigation. So they may not agree with that complainant's view that there has been a lack of communication or that the staff attitude has been poor. But where it is identified, and it does get identified, there is learning that is taken forward. So that might be through supervision by a team manager or a group manager, or there might be training courses that that individual is put on and made to attend. And obviously with the Ofsted report, Ofsted for Children's Services would look at learning that's been identified as part of the complaints process. And similarly with adult social care, when the CQC start to do inspection for adult social care, they'll be looking at learning that's been identified and taken forward.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you for that, Craig. Could you turn your mic off, please? Yeah, thank you. James, you were next.
Chair, thank you. And this is really to develop Craig's point around table 20. Looking at this from the outside, so to speak, not necessarily, I think I understand it, but many people perhaps wouldn't, how this is kind of itemised, because you would imagine, or someone picking this up and reading this report would imagine that certain of these the nature of the complaints points raised would bleed into others, and how when it is taken to the report stage and itemised, how that is effectively sort of tidied up, for want of a better way of describing it, so that you can actually then come to a point where there's 198 here and 203 there. How is that actually managed so that it becomes readable?
So with the children's social care complaints process, obviously at the time Worcestershire Children First were in operation. Obviously they're now back within the council. Worcestershire Children First at that point made the decision on the different categories that they wanted to report on. So the complaint points and the nature of the complaints are fitted into those categories. Obviously, if you look further down the report, adult social care took a different view. There are quite a larger number of natures that are reported on, and similarly with corporate. So whether that is something that now that Children's Services have come back within the council, that could be looked to be revisited, and whether or not they want to change the criteria for those particular natures, so that it might capture additional ones, would be something that perhaps could be proposed.
Just to clarify, were you asking for more granularity in terms of the number of areas of natures?
I guess, I mean, what I was trying to anticipate an area of confusion, if you like, that might step in when perhaps others were taking an educated interest in this, and trying to get a sense of where they would look at this and think, well, we're making progress on, for quality and time, well, not making progress necessarily quality and timeliness of social worker assessment, but lack of delay, in providing assessed service was, and the way in which, a resident would look at this and think, okay, certain things fall under certain headings, and we're making progress or not, as the case may be. It all may be perfectly clear to us. We have relatively sort of regular eyes on these topics, but not necessarily to people who are just periodically looking at this.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I from my perspective, in terms of trends, in terms of improvements against any particular nature, I don't think we have sufficient data actually at the moment to be able to actually understand that ourselves, and that's partly down to the new representation management system we introduced last year, because we have almost gone back to the drawing board in terms of what we capture data-wise. As you will have seen in the report, there's a lot of stats we weren't able to provide last year that we have this year, and that's because we broadened out what we capture. However, that could be something we could introduce in the future in terms of showing whether or not there have been improvements or not across particular natures.
Yeah, I mean, fully understood that the more we load into reports of this nature, in trying to seek clarity, you run the risk of making it unwieldy. But it was just a thought that just emerged as I was reading the report. Really, yeah.
Natalie.
Thank you. Yeah, first a comment really, just picking up on what Paul said. I really like stats, but I also like to understand the stories behind the stats. So for me, I'm really pleased to see that narrative in the learning from complaints section, because I think it does help us gain an insight into I know you say it's how residents see things, but I still think it's really important. And I've got two quick questions. One, I think you might have just answered, Jeff, actually, which is around the data in tables on pages 54 to 57, where in the column for 22-23 there's a space. And is that because of what you just said in terms of broadening out what we're actually reporting on? So do you see where I mean? Sorry. So it's starting on page 54. So it's the one that starts economy and infrastructure, countryside sites north. So that in the 22-23 column there are a lot of gaps. So I was just wondering.
Yes, you're bang on. Yes,
okay.
I've seen it on Paul's screen. I couldn't find it.
Sorry, I'm on the digital pack.
Yes, that's all right. Yes, absolutely. So we didn't capture data against those entries this time last year. It's only since we introduced the new system in October, or late October last year.
Thanks. And just another quick question is around how we look after our staff, I suppose. Because usually to pick up a phone to complain about something, you've got to be pretty angry about it. And I'm just wondering whether, like some organisations, there's a recorded message at the start to say we expect you to respect our staff, and whether the phone calls are recorded and things like that, because I have been on the end of some angry phone calls. Oh.
I can certainly answer that from the perspective of our main council's customer contact centre, and yes, we do have that as an introductory statement, that we don't accept any form of abuse, and we would terminate the conversation. I can't say without checking whether or not all of the council's main contact centres, like the family front door or the adults access centre, have the same message, but we could confirm that. Obviously, individuals that receive a phone call, there is no pre-recording that they hear when they call through, so they wouldn't. And equally, those calls aren't recorded either, but the ones into the contact centres are.
Yeah, thank you for that. And on sticking to page 54, I noticed the highways again maintenance 166 to 60, and then transport, highways transport 101 to 4. There's remarkable change there. Can you put any meat on the bone with that one?
Sorry, we were just trying to find the same table on our document. We're in the direct report rather than the main one, so our pages don't quite align. But are you referring to the change in the number
economy and
of
infrastructure?
Sorry,
it's economy and infrastructure.
On the economy and infrastructure one. Okay, and you're referring to the change in the number recorded against that.
Yeah.
Largely, I think that's just down to the fact that we've got more categories now. So before they would have been all lumped together in one group, and now, thank you, they would have all been lumped against one category, and now they're spread out across other categories. So that's why there's a change.
Craig, you wanted to come in.
Yes, thank you again, Chair. I was actually commenting on the point that you raised earlier as well. There is a section in here, vexatious complainant procedure. I'd just like to get an understanding of that, because it is important that we do protect the staff in the event of the malicious calls, and I've seen them, witnessed them. They are pretty awful, and some people are pretty angry and make all kinds of threats. So, you know, how do we protect our staff, but whilst also protecting the resident that's actually got a complaint and needs to calm down and maybe go through a different process to raise their complaint without this anger coming through to our staff members?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll go first, and then Paul can jump in if he wants to. But yes, so in terms of the vexatious complaints procedure, we have that well documented on our staff intranet site. It clearly explains how staff members can get support if they're receiving regular complaints from the same person or about the same matter from the same person. And there is a defined procedure for them to go through in terms of working with us and senior management in terms of defining that particular person as a vexatious complainant and so on and so forth, and them getting the support they need. In terms of if they're rude or unpleasant to the person on a one-off, that wouldn't be considered as vexatious per se in terms of my interpretation of the policy, but that would be dealt with in a different way. Anything to add, Paul?
Yeah, so we do get numerous calls from managers where complainants have been abusive to their members of staff, and there are policies in place. So a manager can look at giving a single point of contact for that person to make contact with. They can limit the number of responses that we will say. For example, we get an email 12 times a day from the same complainant. We can say that we were only going to respond to you once a week, but obviously incorporate all of the emails that they've sent as a result of that. So it saves a little bit of time for staff having to respond straight away. But obviously we do get complaints saying, well, they haven't responded back to me. And with the vexatious complaints process, it wouldn't stop a complaint being made, because what would happen is we would need to look at that complaint, and if it's a new valid complaint point that is being made, we would still need to take it down the appropriate complaint rate.
I was actually sort of referring to in the instance that it's a valid complaint, but a very vexatious complaint. Is there a sort of a protective policy for, you know, you talked about the one email a week, etc., reduced communications, but you know, there's a valid complaint, it needs to be dealt with, but it needs to, you know, the person that is making the complaint might need to be handheld through that complaint.
Yeah, so that would be on the consumer relations team. So we would be able to help them make that complaint. So, for example, if they had a learning disability or something, they weren't able to write it down themselves, we would go through that process with them and be able to make that complaint and take that forward.
Natalie.
Thank you. I don't know how to explain the table I'm talking about now. It's the one, the one just above paragraph 26. Oh, you've got it now. Well done. It's in relation to the overall outcomes of moderate or high risk complaints, and quite alarmingly, really, the upheld number has gone from 0 to 6 just in this first quarter. So I'm just wondering if that's getting some individual attention and what might be done to try and mitigate against that. I understand that it's very difficult when you're dealing with these things, but if it's a moderate or high risk, then surely that's quite a vulnerable situation that person is actually in themselves. So I just wanted to highlight it and get an explanation, or what you're doing to sort it out, if you can.
As that'll be adults, I'll let Paul answer.
Okay, so this is obviously the annual report, so it's the number of complaints upheld within the year, not just the quarter.
Oh, I apologise.
So for the different criteria, there are low, moderate and high risk complaints, and that risk depends on the complaint that's being made and the impact that it may have on the individual, whether it relates to one specific area or numerous areas, and also the impact that it might have on Worcestershire County Council as well. So yes, it is highlighted, and obviously there will be the adult scrutiny panel where it will be highlighted as well, and the director and assistant director will be aware of it. So when the adult social care annual report is completed, that will be highlighted. And because obviously this is in the public domain, I can't go into real great detail on an individual basis as to why those may have been upheld, but that would be discussed at a senior level.
Thank you. And just to finish from me, we always talk about the complaints, but it's really good to see, you know, that the number of compliments, you know, is still coming in as well across various areas. So I think it's important to talk about compliments too.
Yeah, thank you for that. I know from visiting the parish councils that I go to, it's sort of surprised me over the time the amount of thank yous we get for the work we do. And we don't hear enough about that. Adrian, do you? Okay. Are you happy with what you've heard? Is there anything you wish to come back to the committee? No? No? Well, I thank you for that. Jeff, Paul, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hope the ombudsman's a bit like Ofsted, really, isn't it? You hope for a good one. Yeah. But in a very difficult area. But thank you both very much. Okay, item 8, last item on the agenda, work programme.
Sorry, I don't know what's happening there. It's on silent. Sorry, someone must have said the magic word. Oh.
Right, we go. Well, we've got the. I hope you've noted the date of the next meeting, 25th of November. And so we will be looking at the work programme. Now, on the work programme, we did mention which we want a report coming back on marketing of libraries, which we're looking at for the October.
That's today.
That's the, oh, well, we wanted that to come back, didn't we?
That's what.
Yep. I know I've highlighted the wrong one. So
you're looking at the items for the next meeting?
Yeah.
Here?
Okay. Is there anything else you want added to that work programme?
Yeah, Chair, as mentioned earlier, I would like at some point a report on household support funding allocation and impact.
Okay, I'll take a note of that. And And also, I think we need to remind the CMR of the report that should have been coming back for the future of County Hall. Do you agree?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll follow up that and see. We'll follow that up and
Yeah.
see when that's likely to.
Do that. Next year, are you all happy with the January work programme? No comments? Okay.
Quite a bit to get through in one meeting.
There is. That's going to be a meaty meeting, that one.
It is.
And March performance, October to December quarterly.
So you're adding libraries onto the long list, are you? Or again, for next year?
Yes, we want libraries to come back next year, do we? To see what the yeah.
So we'll add that on. Is that specifically open libraries or
Would be open libraries,
open
wouldn't it?
libraries? And libraries are locked.
And unlocked as well. Yeah.
That's
That's what it's called.
Sorry. Oh, beg your pardon. Yes. There's nothing else to add.
And we'll talk about the possible futures at the next work programme, which will be into the new year. I think that will be probably